Hello, y'all. Welcome to session 7. It's the final session of this baptism class curriculum. Woohoo! Although, as this session, as the title shows, Walking with Jesus, even though the baptism curriculum is over, it actually just began, right? The end of this session says the journey begins. And so just because you watched the videos and you read all these and you wrestled through what's here, that's just a good start. Okay, your journey doesn't end here. It doesn't end in baptism, right? Baptism is just the beginning. And so it's a lifelong process, it's a lifelong journey to walk with Jesus. And if you remember session 5, when we talked about the church, the nature of the church, well, the church comprises reconciled sinners that are learning how to live like saints, right? And so they were sinners, they're reconciled, they're forgiven, and they are saints, but they're not just instantaneously saints, right? They're learners. They're learning how to be saints. And another way of saying that they're learning, or that the church is a community of learners, is that the church is a community of disciples, right? The church is about discipleship, making disciples and being disciples. And so it's important for us to realize, well, first I want to say go read this session, but today I want to talk about the pattern of discipleship. And now this is not original, I'll be honest. I'm pulling from a pastor named Mike Breen. But the way he looks at the pattern of discipleship is 3 major ways, right? He says we need proper information. That's 1. We need proper imitation. That's 2. And we need proper innovation. And so first, proper information is, right, it's the Bible. It's learning about who God is, learning about who Jesus is, but it's finding people who you learn this stuff from, right? These are, if you will, teachers, right? The ancient world had rabbis that the disciples of the rabbis would learn this stuff from. And so in my own life, I was lucky enough to go to school for this. I went to graduate school and I had many important professors, many good, well-rounded professors who were able to teach me this stuff. They were able to give me the information. But that's not what discipleship is, right? You could gain all the information in the world, but it means nothing if you don't do anything with it. And so the second one is proper imitation. So finding someone who you want to live like. It's important. Paul talks to the church, and he does say, he says, you have many teachers, right? They give you a lot of information, and that's good, but you only have a few fathers. And Paul calls himself a father. And then when he calls himself a father of the church, he says, imitate me as I imitate Christ, right? So they look at Paul. He's a good example, faithful example, good disciple of who Jesus Christ is, and they be like him, right? They watch his life, they're surrounded by him, and they see the way he acts, the way he lives and interacts with people. It is like Jesus Christ, and so they imitate that. And so in our lives, we need to find those people, whoever they may be. It could be the pastor, it could be a minister, it could be your mom, it could be your dad, it could be anyone in your life, right? But only find those who are following Jesus, right? And who are following him well. And so you imitate, you learn their pattern of life and you make it your own. And then for me, I was blessed. I had a youth pastor. He's amazing. I mean, yeah, he gave me a lot of good information, but what's more important is I got to watch him, and I do imitate him often, right? Whenever I'm in a situation, I kind of think, what would Josh do? Because he is a great imitator of Jesus Christ. and how he interacts with his wife, with his family in the church, with me. And so I find him to be my father in the faith, and I imitate him. But you have the information, right knowledge about God, imitation, proper acting out this knowledge by watching other people. But then you got to apply it to yourself, right? It doesn't just end with other people. Discipleship is about you as well. And so that's the third step, innovation. And that's just applying what you learn and figuring out how to learn and live in your own life context, right? So you have the information, you have the imitation, but you have to apply it to your own life, right? And you have to innovate it, you have to make it your own. Thus, a disciple always becomes a discipler throughout their lives. And so this process is a lifelong process of being a disciple while also being a discipler. That doesn't mean that you go off and be a pastor or a minister on a vocational calling sense as a career or job. But that just means you're always a student and a teacher. And that could just mean being a parent, having your children, right? Children will ask you millions of questions, and so there you are. You're already a teacher. But you're not just a teacher, you're also a disciple. So it's a both and kind of thing. But so this is the pattern, but it's important, right? So this is the walking part. This is the pattern of discipleship, but it's walking with Jesus. So this entire pattern is rooted and focused in Jesus Christ and who he was, who he is, and who he will always be. And so an important section of scripture, I think an important one for describing our discipleship with Jesus Christ, comes from Mark chapter 8, verses 31 through 38. It says, Jesus, then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said all this quite openly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, Jesus rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." He called a crowd with his disciples and said to them, "If anyone wants to become my follower, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." And so that's the call to discipleship, right? That's Jesus talks about a yoke, right? A yoke is what you put on animals to direct them, preferably animals that work the fields. And he says, "Put on my yoke. My yoke is easy." But how is it easy, right? Because the yoke and the burden he calls his disciples, right? The yoke and burden of discipleship is the cross, is giving up your life, losing your life in order to gain it. How is that easy? Well, in Jesus Christ, right, we view it through Jesus' own cross. And what does his cross mean? It doesn't mean a tragedy. It doesn't mean the end. It actually means resurrection. It means glory. It means praise. Hallelujah. And so in Jesus Christ, we view this harsh suffering, this burden of the cross in a good light as joy, because it's only in Jesus that such suffering can be a joy. But suffering isn't easy, even when you trust in Jesus, when you trust in his cross and resurrection. Life is hard, and it's not an easy walk, right? Walking with Jesus doesn't automatically mean an easy life. It is hard, and you can be honest with that when you're going through your pattern, when you're living as a disciple. But it's important to root this whole thing, right? Discipleship as taking on your cross, as having proper information, imitation, and innovation. What does it mean for you to be a disciple? All this needs to be rooted, ironically, in weakness. And so this pastor named J.I. Packer, he wrote a great book called Weakness is the Way. And he says, my own recognition that the Christian way of life and service is a walk of weakness. As human strength gives out, only divine strength can sustain and enable. And so as we walk through discipleship, as we carry our cross, and life is hard and there is suffering, it's okay. We don't have to take that on ourselves, right? We don't have to be strong in our suffering. We can embrace the weakness because Jesus embraced the cross, right? He embraced dying. He embraced the weakness of the cross. And he gained everything, right? He was resurrected and he's king over everything. And so we could trust that God has our weakness, right? That in our weakness, God makes us strong, is Paul's message to the church. And so that's discipleship, right? That's the pattern: proper information, proper imitation, and proper innovation, right? We're always disciples and disciplers, or disciple makers. And we're in a community, right? The church is a broken community that comes along and learns how to do this discipleship thing. But it's all rooted in the cross of Christ. Bearing your cross is discipleship. But when that suffering is hard and not always joyous, because we can be honest, we can trust that weakness is the way, right? Through our weakness, God makes us strong. And so I hope these videos with me and Dr. Robbie have been helpful in your journey onto baptism. We're excited to celebrate baptism with you. And we hope that these lessons stay with you, that your journey, that your meditation on who Jesus is and all these truths we've been talking about doesn't end here with this final session, but it just begins, right? And so you're a lifelong disciple, you're a lifelong student, and you'll grow in maturity and you'll grow to be disciple makers is the goal. So thanks for joining us with these videos. I hope y'all are doing well, and we miss you, and we can't wait to celebrate baptism with y'all. So thank you again. Thank you, parents, for going through this stuff with your students, and we hope it's been as beneficial for y'all who have already been baptized as it is for those anticipating baptism, because it's always a good reminder to remember our own baptism and remember Jesus through the Lord's Supper every week. So thank you so much for joining us, and have a good day. Peace.